Cults are a very interesting topic of conversation. While most cults aren't necessarily considered violent, instead only about 30% of reported cults are considered to have violent tendencies, it's interesting to look at cults because when you first bring up the subject, you tend to think of the two most violent cult leaders, which would be Jim Jones and Charles Manson. Both of them were able to coerce their followers into a type of violence, separate types of violence, but a type of violence under their names. Charles Manson was able to get away with an estimated 35 killings with his cult, while Jim Jones had over 900 followers who he was able to coerce into committing a mass suicide under his name. So, with these instances and many others regarding cults, I wanted to see what exactly allows a person or convinces a person into joining a cult and becoming a part of it permanently. So while doing research about this topic, I realized that most members of cults don't realize that they're actually a part of a cult until it's too late and they decide that it's time to leave. There are some cases where they just never know that they have been a part of a cult, but this tends to be more visible in younger kids, especially if the family has been with the cult for a little while and that's how they understand life. But the way that cults tend to recruit new members are by picking on what they would consider the weakest link of society. Now, what do they consider as the weakest link? They would maybe look for people who are new in town and recruit them through unsuspecting ways of maybe a book club, invite them over, talk about the cult, and then eventually drag them into the cult until they become a proper member. Or a more likely version would be to pick on people who were considered introverted or not as social with other people. The use of the internet has increased how many people get recruited into cults. This is because through the internet, they're able to easily pick out who is more dependent on the internet to have social interactions, and they prey on those people and drag them into a cult to make them feel like they have friends and they have people that they can socialize with. But with a cult, it's also important that the cult leader has a specific formula that they fit. If you look through history, you'll notice these couple of traits within almost all cult leaders. They are considered to be very charismatic, but they also are considered to be sociopaths and narcissists. So it's those combination of traits that allow them to be a good leader, but also allow them to be manipulative and force the cult members into doing what they want. But how exactly does a cult member get indoctrinated into a cult? What are the steps that are taken to go through the process? The first step that cult members or cult recruiters would take to bring you into a cult would be to give you a soft sell. So as I stated earlier with the book club analogy, they would introduce you to the basic concepts of the cult, make it seem like a really fun and good time for you, and then slowly bring you into meetings and slowly get you adjusted into the community and make you feel like you are part of a second home when you're part of the cult. The second step that's taken when indoctrinating you is they start to rewrite your reality. They start to manipulate you in a way where you can't trust your own brain, which is why they tend to pick on the weakest links of society, because they want people who are already emotionally vulnerable and insecure. That way, it's easier to twist their brain and make them feel like they can't trust what their brain says. Anytime you have an idea where you're like, oh, this is a basic concept of life. Gravity is what holds us on the earth. They'll look at you, the cult leaders and the other cult members will look at you and say, no, that's wrong. And you'll start to second guess yourself and believe that whatever you think is correct is not correct, and in fact you should be depending on the people around you, specifically the cult leader, to tell you what to think and tell you how to act. And this leads into the fourth step of then the leader starts to build themselves up and build themselves as a godlike figure towards the members of the cult. They put themselves in a position where they can do no wrong, where they are no longer human, but instead they transcend what you expect out of regular people. And then from there, whenever the leader asks you to do something or asks the cult as a whole to do something, because you no longer depend or trust yourself, you try to look towards others and try to depend off of them. But because no one can depend on themselves anymore, they all fall into peer pressure. So what they think they shouldn't be doing anymore, they start beginning to do, and they begin to just go with the status quo and go with what they think they should be doing rather than what they want to do. So it's through these mind games and manipulation tactics that cult members start to feel like they have to be part of a cult, or just ordinary people feel like they must depend on the cult and the cult leader to live and go through with a normal life. But that doesn't mean that people don't leave cults regularly either, because that's also a very easy process to go through. It's just very difficult to get to the process to go through it. The first step you have to take into leaving the cult is you have to start your newfound reality has to shatter. So that may be taking a step back and looking at the situation as a whole and realizing that what you've been going through, what community you've been surrounded by is actually doctored, and it's all just not real anymore. Another thing that allows people to realize that it may be time to leave a cult is when the leader starts becoming a hypocrite and going against the morals that they initially set when creating the cult. With a situation like a cult, the leader is bound to get a big head about everything when it comes to themselves. With so many people following them and believing that they're a god, they eventually start thinking the same way as well, and they feel like they could do no wrong. So through that process, they eventually slip up, which causes members of the cult to realize that, wait, maybe this person isn't as good of a person or as powerful as a person as we thought. Maybe he is actually human. Maybe they are actually able to make mistakes. Maybe we shouldn't follow them anymore. Doing research on this project, I initially started it because I found the concept of cults interesting, and I found it fascinating that people were able to join so easily. But having done the research and having understood what really happens to a person and what the experiences a person has through being a cult, I think it's amazing that people are able to be survivors of situations like this, and are able to work through their PTSD, work through their insecurities, work through their anxiety, and try to live a normal life after everything that they've experienced.